this exercise, but you know, if you really want to get strong, and it will help you to hit it further, the difficulty is actually making people to do that bit. So from training, you'll find elite players or professionals will be very into the training. Your average person, I've spoken to thousands of people, say, you know, do you want to work on your body, get fit? They'll just say, no, not really. So, but the body, if you're serious about doing it, is important.
And then the one between them all there, the glue. And we're going to have a conversation about this because of Martin's new equipment.
Oh, equipment. Yeah. Again, this isn't you know, a club fitting seminar, but you know, most people are using ill-fitting clubs. Even me. So I don't play much these days. My back's not very good. So I've got the same set of clubs I had 10 years ago. And I tried to play them 6 months ago and thought, you know, I'm finding these hard work. S300 dynamic, I also had a fitting on graphite now. So I've been using clubs that weren't even good for me for the last 6-7 years.
Yeah.
But you just don't even think about that sometimes. But yeah, the fitting's vital. I never quite like to tell punters to buy a new set, but sometimes you have to tell them that it's just the right thing for you. That's very true.
And Martin's had a big breakthrough recently with new shafts. And there's a lot going on with heads at the moment.
Yeah, there's a new shaft come out in the long drive business, but it's actually available called TPT. It's from a Swiss company who were making masts and boats for speed. I thought it was amazing because there's no seaboarders in Switzerland, but they're the expert in making boats, yeah. But the TPT shaft has very different flexes, but with very low torques. But there's always new stuff coming out, shafts and heads as such, yeah, but that shaft is exceptional. Now this is straightforward. You're all coaches. So this will not be that exciting, I think, to see. But this really, for me, is something that I would tell younger coaches of someone coming in. So students, they would have heard of club speed, and a student will only come to you, so I want to get my speed up. So I have loads of people coming to me for distance lessons. They only think I'm going to work on one thing, club head speed. Still, I reckon 90% of people have never even heard of ball speed. You as pros take it for granted. And you know, when they're on telly these days, for the event, they'll have a ball speed number, yeah? The amount of people said to me, they've seen the long drive guys swing it at 150. They said, I see Rory swinging it at 180. No, he's not swinging it at 180, that's his ball speed. They have no idea of the separate of the two. So that for me, although this is obvious to you, still to this day I've asked everyone coming in, there's two speeds for golf, what are they? They go club speed, 95% of them have never even heard of ball speed. I think the more it's on telly and the more they see it, the more it will make sense to them. We know that tour players, men and ladies, and long drivers are obsessed by ball speed. Now, what's true coming in is that, you know, if someone's got decent ball speed, you might have to work on their club speed or vice versa. So this really is something that I just go through with people who come in for a lesson. They don't understand angle of attack, but don't know how it's measured. Launch angle means nothing to you. Did I hit that ball too high? No, it's brilliant. You're meant to hit it that high, yeah? They think highs doesn't go anywhere. So this really, for me, day to day on the tee, where people do dynamic loft, they think that the loft that they deliver is the same that's on the bottom. We know that actually, generally, what's stamped on the bottom, I don't actually think I've ever had a club measured that actually has the loft it says on the bottom. Tolerances aren't that good. One or two companies are very good, but the rest aren't. They don't know that dynamic loft. So let's take Joe Miller, one of the kings of long drive. He's got a 1 degree driver. Thousands of people have said to me, how does he hit a 1 degree driver? Well, he hits 10 up, so he actually delivers 14 degrees of loft. But people tend to think that you deliver the same amount that you have on the bottom. Spin rate, people are becoming a little bit more aware of that as they have fittings. Impact location, you know when you're teaching, someone hits it off the toe with an iron, the shank it, and you say, where do you think you hit that off? And they say, I towed it. They can't actually feel the difference between a toe and a heel shot. So impact location also becomes massively important. So this is only up there because we all know this, it's just that the person coming in, from my point of view, has no idea of the factors involved in generating distance. They're only interested or only aware of top right. Top right is it, and that's all they got. And then just really following on from that, once you've got ball speed, how do you maximise it? They don't realise that glancing blows, path to face, that interaction's a glancing blow. Angle of attack to dynamic loft, that's a glancing blow, not hitting the middle. And if you can squeeze path to face, angle of attack to dynamic, find the middle, then you can start to crush a little bit of ball speed out of it. And ironically, for most amateurs coming in, they're probably better having a ball speed lesson than a swing speed lesson, and many people think they're going to come in to try and learn how to swing it fast, and they leave just trying to hit it better. So that for me is just something. Launch angle, again, this is to go back to the thing. Once you start getting someone launching at lights, then we know lower speeds, higher launches can go further. They'll always ask that question: is that too high? Is that too high? We've got it in their mind that low's good. So it's a bit of an education for that. Spin rate, we know that generally people spin it too high, but they don't know what particularly a good spin rate would be relevant to their club spin. So probably no discussion on that bit. What we're going to do, we're going to go through the P system. I think we're all aware of that. If you're not, the P system will come up at the top of which part of the swing. I know one of them's just beyond the actual part it says, but if you're not sure which part of the swing we're looking at. Key power sources, drills and examples. That picture on the right, my club face has never been that square. And when someone took the picture, someone was holding the ball there for me as well. So that's not actually reality, that picture, but it looks as though it'll be a good shot. So next one. So this is the P system as we see it. We're going to bring Steve back in here because it relates as we go through. And what we're going to do from a coaching point of view, so mechanical advantage, what could you do in each part of the swing that might make it go faster? My advantage in teaching, I've just had 20 years of picking which bits I need to work on first. You don't need to work it through, you know, if someone's been an established player, they might just be poor in this area here on the way down. Or as Steve alluded to, they might be poor in second phase and they keep sliding their centre of mass to the top of their swing at the wrong time. So it's not really a matter of us, you know, coaching through these things. It's just that I've found over the years, from a speed perspective, if you can find the bit that the person struggles with, individually and independently work on that, you can put that back into the system and it will add speed at that point. And Steve here, what we'll do from Steve's point of view from a ground force, Steve's going to sort of show you how they go through this P system, how his working reaction, action works through the P system.
So it's like this kind of ladder that I've laid out here. So we just start with just the terminology that I'm using. So the load-in phase between P1 and P2, the upload-in phase, the up bit between P2 and P4, the download-in phase from 4 down to around 5, and then from 5 through the launch-in phase. So then when we think, right, how are we going to load? So if we start up on the top left-hand side, that kind of counter move that we would see, or even that tiny little move that we might see a tour player do, maybe a Stenson bump, maybe a little knee kick in. So we're just, you know, that little move that's going to allow us to get the early shift and the centre of mass to move a little bit towards the trail side. Now, something that I didn't mention earlier on is that this disc sitting here, 58% of that is made up with my trunk. Less than 20% of that is made up from my pelvis. 28% of that is made up with my arms and the club. So wherever my trunk goes, that is going to influence where this goes, primarily, because we know this is 58%, okay? So, if we are in this forward bent position with our trunk at address, we are not going from 32 to 0 from P1 to P2, we are still in front bend some, so, and the arms and the club are moving some. So we see centre of mass moves to the trail side regardless. So you're going to have that little bit of acceleration. And from a speed perspective, we're going to want to get more of that. So if we get that push off of the lead side, push that way, ground reaction opposite, if I go that way, the bigger I do this movement, the more speed I can get to the club early, not late. Peter Smith is doing it late. Martin Borgmeyer is doing it early. Okay? So early is good, late is bad. So we got that medial lateral that gets the centre of mass moving. If we don't want to move the centre of mass, nice and easy, I'm going to do the opposite. Early backswing, I'm going to push off my trail, and then I can move my mass over to my left side. Okay? So think about those medial lateral forces, how the loading, whether we want to load to trail or we want to load to lead, think about the forces we're going to use underneath each foot to move the centre of mass accordingly. The next one, the uploading phase, the mass moving up, the unweighting begins. Is from this upload is from shaft horizontal to up, top of backswing. This uploading move where the golfer is beginning their unweighting. From here, spine is changing its angle and its orientation. It's not staying in front bend, it's coming out of front bend. It's going into side bend or tilt. We're getting this movement here, so we're replacing what we've put in the front into the side. Golf's very much a side-on sport, backswing and into impact. So that unweighting is very important. So we complete the upload. However, before the upload is complete, before we get to the download, we've got this all-important push off the right, which is the recentering. Tour players tend to start that recentering from P3 to P4. Long drivers begin the recentering anything just after P2 to P2.5. So if we're getting this stop of the sway, that has to be something happening here off my right side. So we're getting that push early. From a kinematic standpoint, if before the top of the backswing you've got your final push, or your peak amount of push towards 3 o'clock on this clock before top of backswing, we'll have a very, very good kinematic sequence and pelvis will lead first. The downloading, that's our peak acceleration down using gravity. We're up the top, we are coming down super fast. Lee will talk in some of these slides here about the speed that's created, the peak hand speed, and at what point the hands should be moving at their fastest. And that's an interesting one when you ask your players, when should the hands or when should the club be at peak speed? A lot of people think that hands are at peak speed coming into impact. Hands are at peak speed at this point. Club is at peak speed at that point. If I get hands at peak speed at this point, where's the club going to get to peak speed? It's going to be too late, so we're going to have a problem there. So, the downloading, the acceleration down, the drive down, forwards, outwards into the lead foot, boom. Stepping on those force pedals, the sponges, the hedgehogs, getting those forces down and out. And then from there, once we've downloaded primarily through that lead side, 2.7 times down your body weight if you can, we then can launch. Launch, I say, is quite a crude term. It's obviously exaggerated, but let's say launch is rise. So that's our rising phase. Lead side is rising up. Trail side is dropping down. We're getting the necessary tilts that we need at impact to deliver the arms and club into golf ball. So launch is what we see the fastest players do. Rising up is what we see elite players and above do. We don't see any of that from our recreational golfers. And we know that that launching phase will have an opening of the lower body as well. So we're getting into a position where pelvis is more open than rib cage to shoulders with the shaft and club delivered into body. So we may see that lead jump. I call it the rainbow foot move. The foot might do this. The reason why it's in a rainbow shape, think about it. If I'm pushing forwards, I've got a backward, toe to heel. If I'm pushing outwards, I've got an away. And if I've got a vertical, I've got an up. So we get that look. And when we get this in position and can orientate the rib cage and deliver the loft we want or attack angle at impact, this is no problem at all if this is in the right position. And we may have this for more upward, we may have this for more downward, and shift the swing direction accordingly. So there are kind of 4 power phases: load, upload, download, and launch. Force precedes the motion, what you see on your video camera, so you can look at certain positions and think what force is affecting that movement. Make sense? Over to you.
So, our speed can be created above the ground. So we've got the ground, we're starting to get a good idea of what the feet and their interaction with the floor. We're now going to look at how that can be created above the ground. How we're going to get energy and impact. So there's 2 types of work we can do on the club. One's linear and the second's angular. So from a very simplified idea, linear would be the distance that your hands are travelling in space, how far you can make them move, and then the force applied on them. The main force is happening in this early part of the downswing. A bit like if your car broke down. If you gave me longer to push it on my own, I could get it going, or if there was more of us, we could get it going quicker. So linear work. So there's a very simple explanation. If I was to show someone here, this would be linear work. I'm just hitting my hand. The only way I could hit my hand harder would be to move at the same force but for a further space, or to apply more force. So if I hold the centre of mass, the balance point of the club here, this would be angular work. So this is linear, this is angular work. This is me rotating the club around its centre of mass. The only way for me to hit my hand harder would be to increase the amount of rotation through it, or to increase the torque, the twisting force. Linear stuff in the backswing and the golf swing is seen through a length of hand path. And you can see from here my backswing looks strange because I've cut all the angular work out. Angular work, if you were to look at it from a very simple idea, would be like a John Daly swing, where you're just moving the club round the clock. So 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock. I wish I can't get back to 6, but I've had to let go of it. But I'm moving the club almost through that. So linear work and angular work are the only work. And we know that the only connection with the golfer to the club is the hands. So from that perspective, that's where that work's got to get into the club. There's a bit of discussion, and I'm not a scientist. Sasha McKenzie and most of the other golf scientific world believe that linear work provides most of the force. So that's what the majority think. Michael Jacobs, if you've seen Michael Jacobs work with Brian Mozella, they believe angular. I don't know, I'm not a scientist. All I would do is I'll tell you that's what most agree. And what we'll do today, hopefully, is give you some ideas on how to train both of those, just to see how we can get some more out of the system from there. And we look across the bottom, the hand path length, force along that hand path, the amount of club rotation, and the torque about the rotation. Steve, next slide, please.
So, from a ground reaction force standpoint, there's a slight error on the slide. See if anyone points it out in a minute as I get through it. I'll correct myself. I slightly changed this slide last night and at 1 AM obviously wasn't aware that I didn't change the wording on one of the boxes. So anyway, ground reaction forces, we've got I'm not going to go into this, I've just been barking on about it for an hour. Medial lateral, left to right, right to left. Vertical, down and up. AP, front to back, toe to heel. Forces create motion, twist or rotation about our centre of mass. So the ability to tilt, the ability to turn, and there's the error, the ability to bend. So that should be sagittal plane, not horizontal plane. So there are 3 planes of motion in space that we're moving.
Everyone got that, Stephen, the area?
So tilt, turn, and then we've got bend, okay? Force allows us, importantly, to rotate about the centre of mass. Any questions about those slides there? Hank, you was pretty good at asking questions last time on the online.
I put myself up last time.
We always talk about this. We question each other all the time, don't we?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Right, here we go then. So let's get into the nitty gritty then. Let's talk about the mechanics.
So looking at the top there, we put Martin up. We used a long driver at the top. We could have used the tour player. We've used long drivers at the top because what they do is a bit exaggerated. It's a little easier to see. We can take that back to what a tour player would do. And actually, that second swing, someone said to me that he's slightly past P2. It is, but it's sort of Martin's P2 because he's got the club horizontal there. So we'll sort of talk through these, and as we go through, we'll talk through now. There's outliers in everything, so you can pick on most of these points here, and what you can say is someone doesn't do this, but we're just looking at commonalities. What do most of the greats do? So be primed at setup. So what we see, Bryson obviously took a speed journey that became famous because he became the fastest man on tour and has been very competitive in World Long Drive. And be primed at setup. And we know that when Bryson's going to hit a big shot because he starts doing it, and this is his priming the system ready to go. So what you'll see is a lot of players at setup will, as they practice, will prime their body to hit hard shots. It's a really good way to practice as well. So you see Steve just trying to prime himself to get some energy into the system. It's very difficult to go from a dead still start to get it going. We know that Lee Westwood has never had that type of move, and Joe Miller never used to have that type of move. So, you know, there are players who don't, but generally, if you really want to get one going, you need to be primed. And certainly if I was practicing. So, one of the easiest ways to add speed, to say you had a student coming in, especially with a good player that you didn't really know their swing that well, one of the quickest ways to add power to them or add speed to them are the simplest. So you could structure their practice where you up the quantity of shots that they're hitting, get them to do that at max intent, not how they play this. When people try and add speed, quite often do it wrong. They try and start to learn to hit the ball in the course really hard. That's not the way. Rory tried it a couple of years ago, it didn't work. And why would he try it when you're the best driver of the ball on the planet? Who knows? But he did go through that phase. The secret is to actually, if this is your max speed, this is your playing speed, is to train crazily at max speed, and that drives your playing speed up. It's actually not to play at a faster speed. And the weird thing is that you could actually then be hitting it 3 months later. Say you were hitting it at 105, and your 111 probably won't feel any different from the 105 at all.
It's actually really difficult to swing slow and tolerated swinging fast.
Yeah.
Whenever I've done kind of this speed training with tour players or elite players, is that you sort of want to get them back into game mode and do some performance stuff, get a combined test going or a driver test going at the end of the session, and you just say, look, go back into game mode and just get me a fairway finder. Like, oh, that's really difficult to do, in the sense that they just got used to swinging so fast. So therefore, when you think about it, if the brain can tolerate neurologically sending the signals faster, and the body's tolerating the body moving faster, then when it goes into that mode that's game should be getting easier, right? Because you're swinging it slower. So long drivers, it always struck me, they would say, I'm just going to chip one down there.
Yeah.
It's a chip swing that they play golf with, because they train at 140 plus, 130 plus.
And even go back to the Ryder Cup last year, Europe got absolutely hammered. But one of the final nails in the coffin was Bryson hitting that first tee shot of the day on the last day on the green. Killed us at that point.
Yeah.
And the commentator said, I think he had 190 ball speed or 189 ball speed. Crowd's gone mad. The commentator said, can't believe it. He's come out of his shoes. He's hit it as high as no, he hasn't. He's got 210 ball speed. He's chipped that on the green. He hasn't tried doing it hard at all. So I didn't agree with the commentator on that, because they were saying that he's gone with everything there. He hasn't. He had 20 miles an hour spare on that. So the point there is to actually practice at a much faster. Be primed. If you're practicing, really start to move it. Really start to get yourself going. You can get energy in the system. It's a really good way to practice. And if you watch players, we know that a lot of guys on tour will have a stock shot standard. They'll have an into the wind shot, and they'll have a bomb. So if I was teaching tour players, which I do, Stevens, I wouldn't have one drive. I'd have them 3 different drives. With an amateur, I'd be lucky if they got one drive. But I'd have 3 different styles of drive. And if you see one of the big guys, you know when they're going for the bomb shot, because it looks different. So practicing priming and on the course priming can really help. So we talked about trigger moves or counter moves or whatever you want to call it. We put Martin Borgmeyer or Stenson. There's many. So Martin Borgmeyer, Martin Borgmeyer's got a famous one, and he came with it on a small version. I just let him make it 10 times bigger. But it makes sense from a speed out to the club point of view. And it was athletic genius. There was nothing to do with me. He had it. I just made him embellish it and made it bigger. So he's got a quadruple move. Okay, so again exaggerated, then we'll turn it back to normal players, yeah? So he's quadruple moves. So he goes up, left to go right. Number one of Steve's medial laterals. He then puts his hip movement anti-clockwise, clockwise. So impulse, Steve, we didn't mention impulse. Impulse, if you remember, is
over time. So effectively, the fact that he's got his pelvis turning in the opposite direction, he's got to do a number of things. He's got to slow it down because it's turning at speed. He's then got to change direction and then accelerate it. So he's actually working the ground for a longer period of time. We look at graphs and we look at this peak amount and say, oh, this mountain's fantastic, but the area beneath the curve is impulse, is work over time. So we don't want a graph that looks like this. So we just got a peak amount. We actually want a graph that goes up like that, and then the area beneath it's much bigger. So the fact that he's moving this pelvis in the opposite direction means that he's got to work the ground, and he can accelerate. And back to the timings thing, he gets it done early because of the counter move and the fact that he can get, invoking Newton's laws, get force in, energy into the system and get the acceleration nice and early in the segments.
So we've got those first two bits, left, right, anti-clockwise, clockwise, right knee flex, straighten, low to high. Bit of genius. I've been trying it with everyone now, but he came in with that, I just made it bigger. Now when I started teaching tour players, I see they do little baby versions of that. There's mixtures of them, and what I would do is try, I could probably name 5 or 6, but the one I see most on tour is a baby ball guy. You see, if you get really slow motion cameras, they'll have a little, that little tiny trigger move. It's just a little baby one, a little right knee flex. Stenson has his own one. What's Stenson's one?
Stenson's that little lateral across that way, again before the club even moves. That little bump, these are great, these bar stools, by the way. I use these similar in my studio, but you can stick one outside or stick an umbrella or an alignment stick outside, just from a little bump towards that, and that little move, not going outside the feet, just that tiny little move that gets things going. Rory's a bit more dynamic, it happens during the takeaway. And then obviously from a centre of mass standpoint, from Martin, that low to high, and then that acceleration of the centre of mass from left to right, or from lead to trail.
So, how we're looking at this is how does this stuff going in the ground start to come into your body and start, more importantly, to get out to the club? Because that's where it gets vital for us. So if we look at the movements that we do, so this is a leg popper. You would have seen me use this before. I like it as a teaching aid. I've got a light one and a heavy one there. But if we just start to move as Martin is doing there, and as he starts to move it back, you'll start to be aware of how much speed I'm able to get into the club head. Generally, faster backswings create faster downswings, better stretch across the system. And what we see, why the long drive guys will move and get it done early and try, they've now got to try and slow this club down and move it back. So from here you can see, just as I move that again, you can hear how much speed I can get out to this. To give you some idea, long drive, from a measuring point of view, I guess you all use launch monitors, indoor facilities. You've got TrackMan, Quad or Flight Scope. I use Flight Scope because it measures practice swings. The other two don't. So that's the main reason I use that. If you don't, from a measuring device point of view, these are available in Finland, I would have thought. So you've got PRGRs or SSRs, yeah? Now SSRs are swing speed radars. They're good. They sit outside the club. They do measure the toe of the club, not the middle of the club. So the toe can move much faster than the middle or the heel. So use it, but just be aware that it does give a slightly false reading. So the PRGRs are excellent. So one of the things that we found as well with PRGRs, if you swing it and do that backswing motion, it actually, if you don't swing down, measures your backswing. So it will make that beep and you can measure it. Long drivers get up to about 40, 45 miles an hour in their backswing. That's fast, yeah? And that's why when you saw the video of Martin earlier, when he was bending the shaft on the way back, that wasn't camera distortion, he was bending the shaft on the way back. And from a speed perspective, it makes sense why the long drive guys, if you imagine I was holding like a med ball or a Swiss ball and I wanted to throw it, I could get much more momentum into it if I went there first. And very often that's why you see the long drive guys first before they move the club. So if I go even crazy and do it this way, if I go really forward first, you can hear me get even more speed out to it. Now, teaching players, they don't need to do the crazy exaggeration movements. If you just started to get this club moving away and get some sense of speed into it, it really helps. Tempo-wise, we know that tempos in swings, generally good swings take about a second. 0.8 of that is backswing, about 0.2 of that is downswing. Has anyone used any tempo apps before? Tour tempos, has anyone seen that or used that before? You've used Tour tempo, yeah? Putting tempos, yeah. I think a 2-to-1 ratio is generally, yeah? Where swings generally 3-to-1. And if you get these apps that make a noise, they'll go beep, 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 so it'll be start, top, impact. Quite often you get players and the 3 beeps have gone and they're only about here, when at the point there should be impact. So then it becomes very helpful sometimes to do tempos. And tempos, and I can play a couple later, I've got my tempo thing on my phone, so when we're practicing later, we can put some tempos. And I think, as I said earlier, I think it's very beneficial to practice at quite fast tempos. It teaches you to swing really fast, so you might downgrade that when you play it, but there is no harm in practicing in that. And also if you're practicing, doing it in a net can be very helpful as well when you have no worry about where the ball's going. Which, yeah, from there. Okay, so sorry, let's go back to that. Sorry, Steve. So centre of mass lies, then right at centre of mass accelerated, and low and slow, which we were just talking about. So some drills there, and I think we've got the videos for those drills. Steve, if we can play them. I think one of the videos might come out sideways though.
This one actually, I think Stenson's one. I think I corrected some of these.
Now again, we've gone long drive to show how, just from an exaggeration perspective, we're obviously going with driver there, yeah? But we can see how that mass has been moved off to the right and how quickly that's been done. The image to the right is Stenson's, and we can see his trigger move. Steve, if that plays again. And we'll sort of see how, from here, he makes this initial bump. So there it goes first before he moves the club, and that makes perfect speed sense. You're going to move first, you can then put more speed into the system, and if you really got into it, if you had a PRGR, if you use a TrackMan or quad, it won't measure practice swings, that actually measures backswings, which can be really helpful for someone who moves the club back very slowly.
P2 to P4, the recentering of the pelvis there, so you wouldn't be getting those lateral forces underneath that trail foot and vertical forces enough to get the tilt into the pelvis and the pelvis back to the centre of the stance of the backswing, which will then allow him to hit the variety of shots that he needs to hit with low point control.
And as Steve said earlier, getting back has to be done early, not late.
Yeah, 100%.
And this is just a show of that excessive trigger move, but I see tour players do that, but on a much smaller version. You'll sort of get a sense of how fast that backswing is. It's crazy fast, yeah? Next slide then, please. Here's Martin just doing a forward drill. Again, if I was measuring this, I'd expect a person to be able to swing this 3 to 4 miles an hour quicker. I would do it as Martin's doing it here. He's not actually hitting the ball. If you had a really good player, they can actually hit balls doing this drill. If you get a not so good player, they've got no chance to hit the ball for as long as they live, yeah? So good players can actually hit it from that drill, bad players not so. And sorry, if anyone wants to, there's loads of room if anyone wants to have a look at one of those gadgets. And have a swing, whatever you want to do. And then on the right here is Alfie Plant. He's a Challenge Tour player that Steve teaches. I think he won on the Challenge Tour this year, Steve, didn't he?
Yeah, 2 times now since,
He's won twice now.
Working together.
And Alfie is a man of not great stature. Martin is a 6'5" monster. Alfie would be maybe the reverse of that, yeah?
Dude, 106. We got his fastest when we tested him initially was 107, but he was afraid to keep it on the drive range. He wasn't going to keep it. Alfie was now playing. We were at 120. So a year later we were 117. This year we got to 120. 2 years later, from a speed training perspective, what does he gain between 112 and 114? But bearing in mind 106, it's just been a massive game changer for him to be able to get that extra speed out of the golf course. What do we per club?
1 mile an hour is worth about 2.75 yards.
On the course, massive, huge carry distances. Ball speeds, we're now over 170, which he wasn't anywhere near that. 106, yeah. And the thing is, plus. So 2.75 per 1 mile and per mile an hour of club head speed. That's in yards. So huge difference when you're starting to add 8, 9 mile an hour on the golf course. So
some interesting work there that me and Steve did with Ollie Wilson.
Yeah.
So I think Ollie came to me swinging it can't remember now, 110.
110 tops. But the problem with Ollie was that he was on course. He was reloading on average about 3 or 4 times per round.
But in practice, which he doesn't use on the course, but was genius for practice, he reached the peak of what?
So we're now, 128 was what we got out to with speed training last year. And he now comfortably games between 115 and 116. And and we'll push out speed training on tour. So we do reps of 6 when he's playing. So at venue, on course, not on course, should we say, on range at tournament, he'll do 2 of these or 3 of these sessions per week. 6 balls all out. Doesn't matter where the ball goes. I think firstly it was overcoming that hurdle of amongst peers, hitting it everywhere on the driving range. But we're just shocking the system into going faster, neurologically just processing the signals faster and making the body move quicker. Not technically doing anything. 6 balls, maximum intent, 0 outcome. All we're doing is trying to change the launch monitor number. Okay? So we do that between 2 and 3 sessions per week. And it's liberating because he can just smash it. Ras Al Khaimah, the brief, where he led tour #1 in driving distance for that particular event, which is pretty impressive considering his age at 41, and out driving the guys at that event as well. So, I mean, it's a massive deal for Ollie now, and going forwards we know that we just got to keep our finger on the pulse. We don't let it regress anyway. With Alfie, it's meant that he's won twice on Challenge Tour. That extra distance has given him less club into the green. We know from Brody and strokes gained that if we do advance the ball further, it's going to allow us to have less shots to the hole.
So the gadget I handed around earlier is a great gadget for getting speed out to the club. So it gives you a sense of doing this. The gadget on the right there that Alfie was using, I don't think the video plays correct. I think does it skew it?
No, it's good video.
Fine. So what we'll see is that how then does he get that feeling of his body getting out into the club? So if we were training it, I would do, if the person wasn't getting speed out to the club, I'd go with a popper. If they couldn't get a sense of their body motion or the foot, this is a brilliant device. So this is made by Mach 3. Mach 3 has some quite good training stuff. Basically, it's Kelvin Miyahira's stuff that Mike Ramatowski bought or took over. I don't know if it's probably available in Finland, Hank?
I'm not sure if the web store is available, if they deliver to Finland.
Okay.
It wasn't that, well, like 2 years ago it wasn't, but I'm not sure if it's now.
Fine. So, if anyone asks me afterwards where did I get these from, I will tell them where I got them from. So that's gone. So this machine is excellent. You can see me just going forward. Just to start to build up the body movement, I need to get speed out to the club. Struggled to get through customs with that yesterday.
You need to have a good explanation when you try to bring that.
So from there, Hank, put your finger on it, hold it with your finger, and then it will fly. Then there it goes. There you go. Fine.
Sure, I first started using a lot of this equipment when it was shown to me by Lee. It's quite liberating because all of a sudden I wasn't focusing on the club in P2, which I just spent most of my life trying to position the club that straight in. Surprisingly, when you video it, how good it looks at P2.
The next phase thing. It's meant to have a little bit of bend in it. So as you move it and you change direction on it, you're fighting the momentum. That's quite a heavy one. You can get different weights with that one. But that little change, that little bend, I love it because you have to then start to really think and move it a little bit differently to actually move that little bend, and it just makes it lag that little bit behind. That's built in on purpose. So simply from here, what I was talking about, if you actually had to throw a med ball, how athletically, and sometimes golf, the athleticism is taught out that you actually have to move your body in a certain way to get this going. This is a friend of ours, Josh, who's moving it here. Just training that sort of bit. I mean, you can see how he has to move right foot. So from Steve's perspective, how that moves early.
Pushing off that left side. And then already how he's stabilising immediately under the right foot. So the pelvis isn't swaying towards the wall that he's throwing the ball. He's beginning stabilise the right foot down, pressure underneath the right foot, and how then that enables him to turn the pelvis correctly. Yes, this isn't a tilting drill, this is more of just getting speed out to the arms there so he can get the club moving quicker at the early phase. But there's no lateral late there. It's all done nice and early. So how he's got to get that right foot on the ground before he starts to move his arms and club, where we find, again, if you ask somebody to do this, usually most recreational golfers, they start throwing something and then trying to step afterwards. Coordination and sequence is all wrong. Instead of the step, press, down, forwards, outward some, then we can then start to move the body. 1, 2, 3. Really good.
Next page, please, Steve. So P2 to P4. So we're looking at this next stage. And this is how it works. So Steve's got his movements to P2. What's going to happen from there from a power source point of view? Left arm loads in 2 planes. So I think this is important to see the left arm motion working in 2 ways. What separates faster players from slower players generally is the ability to make their lead arm, which is generally where you measure on a vest or something, move faster than anybody else. We'll talk a little bit more about club acceleration from that point, but how are you going to get your speed out into your arm? We know from 3D data that ladies often have generally faster hips than men. So when people, again in lessons, they say, "What do you want to move my hips fast?" I might say to them, "Well, ladies move their hips faster than you." So ladies generally will have quite fast hips. So it's a bit of the jigsaw, but it's not the whole jigsaw. So we want to get speed out into those arms. So left arm loads in 2 planes. So if you simply see it this way, I want my left arm to go upwards and also want it to get across me. So there's power to be had in upward movement. TPI, you would have heard of TPI as the fitness, sort of the premier fitness people in golf. They would call this vertical chop. Vertical chop's just like a karate chop. The ability to have vertical chop, which comes with body movement as well, will allow you to put force into the handle. And all the time when I'm thinking speed, I'm going back to that linear, angular, linear, angular. What can I do to get speed into the system? There's also a stretch to be had, and we'll talk about more on the way down, is that we know really fast players, adduction, abduction, as they turn and change in their direction, the left arm becomes more adducted, putting a massive stretch across the shoulder complex in both shoulders, and that can be used later as well. So I've got the vertical chop element plus the abduction element. So if we can think of, we've got to get speed out to the club, we've got to apply linear force, we'll be able to do that by moving the arm in 2 planes of up and across. Driving the right hip into internal rotation optimally stretches the lateral pelvic rotator muscle. So what we'll see is that most people coming in don't know how to turn around their hip properly. So in my teaching bay, I've got some hooks that I've put bands on. So this is just a bungee band, and I'll hook it on here. Now for the sake of this, I'll do that with Steve. So if you put that just around your backside there, Steve, I'll come and hold you. Just face me a bit more, please, Steve. So if someone was struggling, I will get them now to just turn this hip around, and so they actually have to go against me, stretching this trail side, right side up against the rib cage and the shoulders. And I would work that, and later on I'd actually do that across the shoulder units as well. But this is how I would do it. I might do that with a Swiss ball as well, but I'm actually, as soon as Steve tries to move, I'm actually being awkward and going the other way on him as well. No, I just did there. This also, Steve, would help from a footwork perspective. I'm trying to pull you the wrong way with your feet, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're trying to push that way to go that way. So this is a really good way how you could work on ground action, reaction, but secondly, from a muscular perspective, you basically want to drive your pelvis into your right thigh to get an optimal stretch across the back. And we know stretch shortened cycles can add speed to the system. Don't be frightened of changing knee flex. Most pelvic motion comes from actually changing your leg positions. Again, when someone comes in, they've heard of shoulder turn, and in reality, shoulder turn is not really shoulder turn, it's torso turn, plus some scapular movement. And then they talk about hip turn. You can't really turn your hips. You can reposition your legs in space that move your hips. So you can internally, externally rotate them. So this is something actually that harmed me a little bit. I went from being a really big hitter as a kid and had it taught out of me a little bit, with someone telling me to try and keep my knees on a line, which was sort of, in the 90s was the thing to do. So from a freedom perspective, if you start to get someone thinking about changing their knee flexes, and their ankles would change, their ankles would flex and extend, that would coincide with ground force action reactions. This knee flex, and these mirrored movements as well. Right knee extends, left knee flexes, right hip goes back, left hip comes forward. This goes into internal, that goes into external. That abducts on the way, this abducts. So you can actually get these lovely mirrored movements. So under a basic headline of don't be frightened of changing knee flexes, in a real simple idea, you get someone moving their legs around, you get those lovely mirrored movements across the legs. And we know that it's the muscles that are producing the ground reaction forces, it's their interaction with the ground. So next bit, high hands are faster. So let's go back to that bit of linear work. So you'll never see anyone with a long drive tournament with a flat swing. It doesn't happen. From the point here of having high hands, what might it do from a long drive perspective? To let the club get around the back a little bit more. It would allow you to apply more vertical chop, so it makes sense. The longer my hand path on the way down, that would make sense. Now, high hands are fast. It doesn't mean everyone's got to win it, because you can win on tour with a flat swing. So all I was doing that, high hands are faster, but say you had someone with a flat swing, you know, Hogan or a Kuchar or a Fowler from that, you can win on tour doing that. But actually just increasing the length of that hand path might help anyway. So high's faster, but even if you've got a flatter swing, potentially, and I know this from experience, as you're younger, we know we make lots of mistakes. I've had some with a flat swing trying to make an upright and ruined it pretty damn quickly, yeah? So it might not even fit their pattern, but that's just a fact as such, yeah? And GRF, Steve, on that bit?
Yeah, so the upload move, as we said, from P2 to P4. So how am I going to get this, you know, talked about this ball going, if I let go of this ball, it's a peak acceleration up, and then it's in this state of deceleration or decel, and then it's peak acceleration down as I come down and start the downswing. So think about then, okay, so if I'm in P2, let's get the forces done nice and early. If we want to help with rotation, let's push out a little bit more towards 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock to get more depth. If we want to get more tilt, we might want to feel a little bit more down into the clock. So again, that changing of knee flex, if I can add some, get this done nice and early, from there I can move into position. All of a sudden there, with that little foam noodle underneath, I can then apply some force through the balls of the toes. That's the metatarsal heads, the base of the toes. I can apply some force. I don't really want to be applying it to the heel, that's extreme. I want to be working through the front, the forefoot of the foot, working the forces down. So my pressure, my vertical forces have moved across underneath my right foot, trail foot here, down a little bit out, a little bit away, and then I'm going to get up, back and around into position. So think about getting that work done nice and early in the ground. P2 is where you want to start to create your forces. P4 is when you're at your peak, pushing away in that direction towards 3 stroke 4 o'clock.
Just talking about lengthening hand path, if someone's not that flexible. So this is the same as the blue version. This is a thing you can't buy. This is just something that was a prototype. This is a much heavier version. If you've got someone trying to swing this, as I'm trying to move here, and you get them do it, you can do it even easier than that. If you've got someone with a golf club and just left their head cover on it, it can have the same effect. And if you get someone to work for a few weeks, say they've got a really short swing and they've got no flexibility across the shoulder complex, just a bit of work here just enables us to just try and get a little bit more length out of it. So there's 2 very quick ways that you can train someone. You won't be able to get one of these, but just put the head cover on the driver, just get them to swing. It makes big changes in the actual length they can do. It takes a few weeks to get some distance out of it, some length, but it will work. So we've got a couple of drills there. So med ball throws over the shoulder, we can see that video coming up, resistance band, and then turn drill, I'll explain it in a second as it comes on. So you've got many ranges of motion of your scapula across the back. It can go up, but we're just talking about the 2 planes of motion of protraction and retraction. So talking about measuring devices and 3D measuring, you can measure your upper torso, and this is how some of them measure. You can measure your torso, or you can measure your upper torso. Potentially, there's a possibility to swing your upper torso faster than your mid-torso as such, on the fact that these shoulder blades can slide across your back. And we know from data that protraction and retraction here are a big thing from there to add another little bit of speed. And it would make sense that if you allow your left shoulder to move a little bit further, there's a finite amount that could potentially get your arm to move further. And we know that retraction of that right shoulder can apply more force back to the linear perspective. So I would illustrate this to someone like this, is that they're not aware. So this exercise here, when you see people do that, it's okay to turn upper torso, but basically I've just locked my shoulder blades in. They're not moving at all. And once you start to free this up, and the person understands this, the other interesting thing is that people tend to think their shoulders are like one unit. They don't see them as 2 separate units. So if you can explain to them that there's 2 separate units, and they can work independently of each other, you can get speed into that. So again, as I said, I've got loads of bands, so how I would do this from a teaching perspective, I would put that under the armpit, and this would be just my explanation of it to somebody, and I'd hold that. So Steve's basically trying to turn his upper torso. He's going to try and turn his pec to touch that band. Pec, yeah. A bit more. There you go. So that would be Steve just training his torso. But then if I change the position, so now put it from here, it changes his sense. So now he's having to retract. So he's a much better stretch across the trail side. And Steve's actually actively thinking of, you can feel that Steve pulling back against me. And again, I'm being awkward. I'm pulling on him on purpose to go. So then the person can understand. Now that makes perfect sense from a speed perspective. You can get this moving faster than this. Those movements are reversed on the way down quite early in the downswing. And early makes sense because that's where you want to apply more force to the handle. Secondly, we've just increased the range of motion of the ability to move club. More range of motion, more time to add force. And if this left shoulder and right shoulder here, you've then stretched the shoulder complexes, which you can use on the way down to add more force to the handle at that point. I think there's a couple of videos there, and maybe we have a coffee break or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it. So this is just the med ball drill, just taken a little bit further, yeah? You can see Josh as well using his feet correctly there as he's moving that upwards. And you can see his shoulder blades here, how that's been pulled across. You can see the shirt just buttoning up there. As you see, that's been rotated. So that's protracted, that's retracted. Steve, do you want to talk this one?
Yeah, so just going to play this one through. So we talk about, obviously with Martin, what he's doing from his lead foot here. Now I use this, you get these resistance bands on Amazon. He's got one with a pulley on it as well, so you can actually hold it, but quite easy. Just getting this movement here, so he's just pushing off that lead side, being able to then get his center of mass to accelerate up. So he's going down, moving up, so we know that he's going to work the ground for longer, and then he can move up into this position here. So really just working it more that way to start the backswing, to really get that push off that left side over to the right side. So just engaging that left to right force and early vertical forces to get the acceleration of the center of mass done nice and early, and its movement done nice and early. So any recentering or repositioning of the center of mass could be done by the time he gets to top of backswing. So it's that early 1 to 2, 2 to 4 then repositioning if required. Whereas most amateur golfers won't be doing that first bit to get that kind of stretch and then the shift across and up and around.
You can obviously see a nice change in knee flex here.
Yeah.
You can also see as this band comes across here, this hip's being moved into internal rotation, and he's getting this beautiful stretch across the trail side. Shoulders here, all the way down that right side.
And you see here the pelvis moves and then it begins to recenter back in again, so the bump across and then back to center. So he's getting that kind of lateral stretch from lower to upper system. Then with both hands, same drill. Now I'm just holding it with both hands, so we get that one there. Single hand this way, and then left foot, single hand that way, and then both hands that way. Good. And then to complete that, so these are variations. So we've gone, still keeping it under the left foot. We've got the single hand, we've got the two hands, and now we're doing it with two hands, and we're allowing that unweighting, peak unweighting or acceleration down, so the fall in, boom. Now these are big exaggerated movements of course, but peak acceleration down begins that fall in. So he's going to be at his lightest state when that is right up here, okay? And then he can accelerate down and make himself heavy really quickly. If he's down here, top of backswing, where's he going to go? He's not using gravity. He's not going to get that unweighted up to 50% of his weight or body weight as a percentage. So getting up there, being able to go down super quick and then drive down through the lead foot, down, forwards and outwards towards 11 o'clock on your clock card as you fall in or free fall down.
That was something I learned of Steve that was invaluable a few years ago, that it's not the amount of fall, that you have down, it's the speed. And that's magic. Because you see a lot of people practicing getting really deep and super squatting. It's not the amount, it's the speed of the drop. And that would make sense if you're trying to jump up.
Yeah.
And that becomes a much more important thing to teach. And then if you go to the range at night, you see everyone getting really deep and squatting as low. So it's not the depth, it's the speed. That's a massive headline.
Yeah, it's that quick, short, sharp pump down into the front of the left foot, into the ball of the left big toe, that met head of the lead foot, pump it
Can
down.
you measure that
to the ground.
acceleration?
Acceleration, don't measure it as a number, we don't do that on the force plates, but that the higher the acceleration means the higher amount of unweighted. So you get somebody's super fast, gets really quick down, then we know that unweighting amount is going to be far greater than somebody that's, your average amateur golfer that's unweighting to 80% of their body weight versus a long driver that's getting 50%. So you know that the recreational golfer is just gently going down, if at all, whereas the long driver's going down super quick, boom, going down, and then the other way around, we've still all this stuff on social media of these guys doing all this funky, no, it's not the amount, it's how quick. So it's that super fast, quick down into that ball of the big left, the big toe of the left foot, into that down, forwards and outwards.
And Hank's going to demonstrate that for us later. You have a very quick move down, yeah?
Absolutely.
So there's variations, 3 different drills that you could do with a resistance band. If you want to get one with a pulley, they do that band system actually on Amazon. You can get it different strengths, that band, so it comes in different colours and different strengths.
I haven't got one of those. What's that called?
It's a resistance band with a pulley, and you connect it. Pulley.
It's not a golf thing.
No. It's an exercise, training for physical training. Yeah.
Ordering one of those at lunchtime.
I think we'll probably go into a coffee break.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Into that one. Perfect.
Thank you very much.